All right, so chapter 1-5, and this is words, equations, tables, and graphs. And I was gonna try to do 1-5 and 1-6 today, but first hour ran a little late, and so I decided to go ahead and break it up into 2 days. So when you see your homework, when I pass it out to you guys, you'll have 1-5 on the front and 1-6 on the back. Just save it and we'll do 1-6 tomorrow, okay? All right, so some of this should sound familiar. It's going to tie into last week, or even I think going back to the first week of school, when we had that big box up on the board, and it was the different words that mean addition, some of the words that mean multiplication, division. We're going to use those. We're going to try to pull those out of some of these kind of story problems. They're not really story problems, but we're going to take, very similar to where we did back then, we're going to take words and we're going to turn them into math equations. So it's very similar to what we did. We're kind of building on. That's why we did what we did a couple weeks ago, where we were learning how to take math sentences and write them, word sentences and kind of write them as math sentences. And so we're going to use that. We're going to look for those keywords that mean multiplication, keywords that mean addition, subtraction, that kind of thing. And we're going to write some equations. Okay. All right. So if you'll notice, and I really like using these as notes, because they will look almost identical to your homework, and that's why I do it. So in the book, I'm given 2 sheets for homework. I use one for the notes and I use one for the homework. That way your notes and your homework really look alike, and I think that helps a little bit. All right, so this top section, it says copy and complete each function table, and we're not going to do all these, so don't worry about copying all these down. Copy and complete each function table, then state the domain and range of the function. So we're going to do number 1 here. So number 1, I do want you to take the time to copy this box down in your notes, because we are going to fill one box out completely so that I can show you how, and then the rest of them we'll just kind of partially do them. Okay, so go ahead and do that. A couple of things that while you're drawing your box, I'll just kind of point out to you. In the box, you still have an X and a Y section of your table, right? These are your X's right here. You can see it's there in that shaded box, but sometimes it's a little hard to see. These are still your Y's. And in the middle, it says a rule, and that's what we're going to write. A rule is just another word, or another word for equation. So we're going to write an equation based on our story problem. And with that rule, or with that equation, we could find the Y for any X we wanted to put in there. Okay. And they give us 4 X's here. They gave us 2, 3, 4, and 5. But with this rule written, I could ask you what's the cost if you had 7 books, and you'd be able to tell me based on this rule. Okay. So first we're going to look at the sentence there. It says each copy of a book costs $18, right? So $18 per book, and shipping on $9 per order. So if I were to ask you to write a rule for this, right, the number of books is our X. And so for any number of books that you order, you're going to pay $18 per book. And what, if you guys remember from our graph a couple weeks ago, what is per? What's the operation that goes with that? Anybody remember? Yeah. You do, yeah. And then what operation is parentheses? You're right. Is it addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division when you see the parentheses? Yeah, multiplication. So we're going to pay $18 per book. So we're going to pay, and hopefully this shows up, and if it doesn't, I can try to write it in a better color. You guys tell me. I'm going to pay $18 per book. And remember, when you have a number and a variable touching, it means multiplication. So if you can put the parentheses around that B if you want to, because we're going to use parentheses when we start actually plugging numbers in here. So $18 per book, and right, or a plus $9 per order. So no matter how many books you buy, you're going to pay a $9 shipping fee. So now we've written an equation. or we've written a rule. Okay. And kind of the silly little way that I explain it is if you think of a Hershey Kiss factory, at the beginning of the assembly line, you've got your sugar and your butter and your cocoa and all the good stuff that goes into it, right? Those are your ingredients or your input, or in this case, your X's. You dump the X's into the rule or into the assembly line, and the machines mix everything up. And on the other side of the assembly line, out comes a row of perfectly little dropped Hershey Kisses, right? So you put the input in, which in this case is our X's. You put the ingredients in, you put them into the rule, and you run them through the rule, just like you run Hershey Kiss machine. And then out pops the output, or the Y, or the Hershey Kiss. Okay. So that's all our rule is. We're going to run information through it, and it's going to spit out a Y on the other side. So looking at this table, if I buy 2 books, right, and this is my number of books over here, right, my input. If I buy 2 books, it's going to look like this: 18, and here's those parentheses that Blake was talking about, times 2 books plus my shipping. Okay, I want to know what the output is. What's my total cost of my order if I buy 2 books? Well, to do that, you have to take 18 times 2, which in this case, thankfully I can do that one mentally. It's 36 plus 9, that's your shipping. So your total order is going to be $45. Okay. And since this isn't a table with X's and Y's, you don't have to put the dollar sign. Okay. Which is kind of weird because it's a story problem and that's drilled into your head from as early on as you can remember. But since it's in a table of X's and Y's, we're not going to put our dollar sign. Okay. All right. So what if I buy 3 books? Well, you're still going to use that rule of 18 times the number of books plus the shipping. And you're going to see what that comes out to. Okay, so 18 times 3 is 54, plus 9 is 63. And then I'm going to keep going with my input. So I'm going to input a 4 in place of the B for books, plus 9. And 18 times 4 is 72, plus 9 is 81. And then on that final line, I'm going to put a 5 in for the number of books bought, plus that $9 shipping. And 18 times 5 is 90, plus my $9 shipping that's on every order, and I get 99. So I wrote a rule based on the story problem. I input all of my given X's, and I got the Y's that go with each X. So now the last thing it asked to do was to state the domain and range. So our domain, and remember, I call them funky brackets, braces, whatever you want to call them. Yours do not have to be beautiful. As long as I can tell what you're doing, you're good. You're going to list your domain. Okay, so our domain is our X's. So that's 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's our domain. And then our range, remember, Y's rise and our mountain range rises. So our range is this, our Y's listed out as 45, 63, 81, and 99. And on your homework, it's going to be just like this. You're going to write a rule. You're going to work that rule with the different outputs or inputs they give you. Find your output, and then state your domain and your range, or your X's and your Y's. And in your notes, if it helps you, to make sure that you know your X's and your Y's is your domain and your range. Okay. Now on these over here, we're not going to fill in the whole box because I don't want to take that much time. I think if you see it done once, you should be able to know how to input everything. But I do want to work on writing a couple of rules, because I think writing the rules is the hardest part of this assignment. Okay. So we're going to look at a couple of these. So we have the number of girls at a camp is 17 less than twice the number of boys. Okay. Well, we should notice a couple of words in there from our box a couple weeks ago. So if you've got less than, what order is less than, or what operation is less than? Yeah, minus. And then we also have this right here. We've got this twice the number of boys, twice the number of boys. What's that? What operation is that, Blake? Yeah, multiplication. And how could you write, if I wanted you to write using a variable, how would you write twice the number of boys? If you use B for boys. What do you guys think? Say it. You're wanting to. What do you think it is? Yeah, exactly. 2B. Good job. So in my rule, I know that the number of girls at camp is 17 less than twice the number of boys. So my rule could be 2B, right? That's twice the number of boys. And then I know that it's actually 17 less than that. So it'd be minus 17. And sometimes it just takes like reading through the sentence 2 or 3 times and just start jotting down what you know, kind of like I did. Like I knew that twice the number of boys, I knew I would make that 2B, and then think about what 17 less than that would look like, put it in a couple of different orders and kind of play around with it until you feel like you've got it in the right order and really representing what the sentence says. Very much like what we did a couple weeks ago, okay? And then again, I'm not gonna work it all out, but this is the number of boys, right? This is your B. And so if I were to put 2 times 40 minus 17, I'd get my output, and I would continue to put the different numbers for B in the parentheses and work it out, okay? All right, let's look at another one here, and let's just write the rule, okay? That's all we're gonna do here is write the rule. So Tom's height is 10 inches more than, what's more than? Yeah, addition, good. Tom's height is 10 inches more than 1/3 of his sister's height. Well, 1/3, we know we could write that as 1/3, right? 1/3 of his sister's height. Do I want to use an S for his sister? What do you guys think? Yeah, I would use an H for height. I wouldn't use S for sister just because it'll look like a 5. So I'm going to use H for height. So I know that if I take his sister's height and then divide it by 3, right? Her height divided by 3. Let me write that a little bit better. I don't really like that. That kind of looks weird. I'll write it like this. There we go. Her height divided by 3, or 1/3 of her height. And then what are we going to do with that 10? Yeah, add 10. And again, like I said, sometimes it's just a matter of reading the sentence 2 or 3 times, kind of marking up what you know, try the rule a couple times, get it to where it really makes sense with what your sentence is. So now looking at my rule, I've got the sister's height divided by 3 plus 10. So again, if her height is 66, now I can get what his height would be. So over here is the sister's height. And over here would be Tom's height based on the different numbers that you wrote in. Make sense? That one's just like the other one. Charge for a hotel room is $75 per night. So how would we write $75 per night? Yeah, 75. And then if you wanted to use N for night, that would work. And then what? Yeah, great. You guys are good at this. 75 N plus 15. Okay. And if there wasn't this plus 15 booking fee, it would just be 75 N. So if it's $3 per minute, then you would just have 3 M. And if there is no booking fee or shipping fee or whatever to add to it, then you would just leave it as the per night. Okay. Does that make sense? Pretty good. You'll have something similar to this in your note or in your homework. Carly walked laps in a charity walkathon. The graph shows the number of laps walked over 80 minutes. Make a function table showing the input minutes and the output. So again, right, you've got X's and Y's. Remember that these are just X's and Y's. And so for this one right here, you would want to find what's the X? Well, the X is 20 because you go over 20. So you know the input's 20. And then go up, not quite, I kind of need to erase that because you can't really see it, but you'll notice the point goes not quite up to 10. So you could guess it is 8 or 9, whatever, because they're not actually marked with numbers. You just have to use your best judgment. And then writing a rule, well, your homework isn't like this, so I'm actually not going to go over that because I don't want to confuse you on that. But on your homework, it says, let's see, yeah. So you're asked to write an equation. Remember what I said? What's another word for equation? Like. Yep, it's right there. Rule. Yep. Rule and equation mean the same thing, right? So if it asks you to write an equation, it just means write a rule. And we've kind of practiced doing that. And then it wants you to make a function table based on some of the information. So if it gives you the X's, you're going to input those under the X's, run it through your rule, and then figure out your output. And then it's going to ask you to graph your, so it kind of gives it to you here. They gave you the graph. But on the one on your homework, you're going to make a function table and then you're going to graph the points yourself. Okay. And I'll be walking around to help you with that. For those of you at home, go ahead and load the assignment in Kami and then email me if you have any questions.